What if I told you most men aren't manipulated because women are cruel, but because they never learned emotional control? That idea alone makes a lot of men uncomfortable, and that discomfort is the point. Because when something triggers you emotionally, it usually means it's touching a weakness you haven't mastered yet. Most men are taught how to work hard, chase goals, and provide value. Very few are taught how to regulate their emotions, how to sit with uncertainty, or how to remain calm when they feel ignored, replaced, or tested. So when those moments show up in dating, panic takes over. The need for reassurance becomes louder than self-respect. And that's where the problem begins. Manipulation doesn't start with bad intentions. It starts when one person cares more than the other and doesn't know how to handle that imbalance. The moment your peace depends on someone else's response, attention, or validation, you've handed over leverage. Not because the other person demanded it, but because you gave it away. This is why emotionally untrained men overtext, over-explain, and tolerate behavior they would never accept if they were calm and grounded. They confuse emotional intensity with connection. They mistake anxiety for attraction. And instead of leading with clarity, they react from fear of loss. If this feels uncomfortable to hear, that's a good sign. It means you're close to something honest. This isn't about blaming women or shaming men. It's about recognizing a pattern that quietly destroys confidence, self-respect, and long-term attraction. Emotional control isn't optional in modern dating. It's the foundation. And without it, everything else eventually falls apart. Picture a man who replies instantly, not because he's excited, but because he's afraid of what silence might mean. He rereads his messages before sending them, adjusts his tone to avoid upsetting her, and explains himself even when no explanation is required. When she pulls away, even slightly, his mood shifts. He starts checking his phone more often. His focus drifts. His confidence drops. Not because anything terrible has happened, but because uncertainty feels unbearable. On the surface, he looks like a good man. He's attentive, consistent, emotionally available. He listens. He shows effort. From the outside, there's nothing obviously wrong with his behavior. But underneath all of it is a quiet dependency. His sense of calm depends on her responses. His self-worth rises and falls with her attention. He doesn't just like her, he needs emotional certainty from her to feel okay. In modern US dating culture, this pattern is everywhere. Texting, social media, and dating apps reward constant availability and emotional reactions. They blur the line between connection and validation. When someone doesn't reply right away, it's no longer just a delay. It feels like rejection. And for emotionally ungrounded men, that feeling becomes a trigger. Emotional weakness isn't about being soft or caring. It's about lacking internal stability. It's about needing external reassurance to regulate your emotions. And once that need is visible, it creates an imbalance. Not because someone is consciously trying to take advantage, but because power naturally shifts toward the person who cares less. Attention becomes currency. Silence becomes influence. This is where exploitation quietly begins. Not through manipulation tactics alone, but through unspoken leverage. The man starts adjusting his behavior to maintain connection. He tolerates inconsistency. He ignores his own boundaries. He gives more than he receives, hoping effort will earn security. The Stoics warned about this long before dating apps, texting, or social media existed. They understood that dependence is a form of slavery, even when it feels like affection. When your emotional state is controlled by another person's actions, you're no longer acting freely. Be honest with yourself for a moment. Have you ever felt that tight feeling in your chest while waiting for a reply? Have you ever tried to act calm while internally spiraling? If so, this isn't a judgment. It's a signal. And recognizing it is the first step toward regaining control. The Stoics taught one unbreakable rule that cuts through every relationship dynamic, every power struggle, and every emotional trap. Whoever controls your emotions controls you. This isn't a metaphor. It's a practical law of human behavior. If another person can reliably trigger anxiety, hope, fear, or relief inside you, they don't need authority, threats, or force. Your reactions do the work for them. This is why Stoicism places such heavy emphasis on emotional mastery. Not suppression, not pretending not to feel, but understanding where your emotions come from and refusing to let them dictate your actions. When men fail at this, manipulation doesn't need to be deliberate. It happens naturally through imbalance. Here are 9 ways emotionally weak men get manipulated, explained through a Stoic and psychological lens. 1. Validation leverage. When your self-worth depends on her approval, your behavior stops being authentic. You filter your words. You hesitate before setting boundaries. You prioritize being liked over being respected. Over time, you stop asking, "Is this right for me?" and start asking, "Will this upset her?" The moment your identity is tied to someone else's opinion, you've handed them leverage. Not because they asked for it, but because you needed something they could withhold. 2. Withholding affection. Affection is healthy when it's mutual and consistent. But when you fear losing it, its absence becomes a weapon. Silence, delayed responses, emotional distance. These don't hurt because they're cruel. They hurt because you interpret them as danger. Instead of staying grounded, you rush to fix something that may not even be broken. Anxiety turns into compliance. You give more to restore comfort, teaching the other person that withdrawal controls you. 3. Emotional tests. Pulling away, becoming unpredictable, or creating distance to see how you react. Emotionally weak men respond by chasing, over-communicating, or proving their value. They mistake urgency for strength. In reality, every reactive move reveals insecurity. Calm men notice patterns. Weak men try to pass tests they never agreed to take. 4. Guilt framing. You've changed. You're not as caring anymore. You're acting different. These statements often appear the moment you stop overgiving or start protecting your time and energy. Guilt works only when you believe you owe someone access to you. If you feel responsible for another adult's emotional comfort, guilt becomes an effective control tool. 5. Future faking. Big promises about what's coming replace real consistency in the present. Plans, commitment, emotional closeness, or a shared future are talked about but never anchored in behavior. Hope becomes the glue. You stay not because things are solid, but because you're emotionally invested in what might happen. The Stoics warned against living in imagined futures because it blinds you to present reality. 6. Jealousy triggers. Casual mentions of other men, subtle comparisons, or attention-seeking behavior designed to provoke insecurity. The goal isn't always malice. Often it's unconscious testing of influence. Emotionally dependent men react by competing, proving, or becoming possessive. Emotionally grounded men observe and decide whether the dynamic aligns with their standards. 7. Moving goalposts. What once earned appreciation becomes expected. What was once enough suddenly isn't. You adjust continuously, trying to meet expectations that keep shifting. This keeps you focused on pleasing rather than evaluating. Over time, you become exhausted and uncertain, while the other person holds the position of judge. 8. Crisis bonding. Drama accelerates attachment. Emotional highs and lows flood the nervous system, creating intensity that feels like connection. Peace starts to feel boring. Chaos feels meaningful. Emotionally weak men bond through turbulence because it gives their feelings direction. Stoics warned against confusing emotional intensity with truth or value. 9. Dependency loops. She becomes your emotional regulator. Her mood determines your peace. Her attention determines your confidence. Her availability determines your stability. At that point, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes a system where you constantly adjust yourself to feel okay. This is the final stage of emotional surrender. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." He wasn't speaking about dating, but he understood human nature deeply. If you cannot govern your reactions, someone else will, intentionally or unintentionally. Modern psychology confirms the same truth. Emotional dependence creates imbalance. Imbalance creates control. And control doesn't require bad intentions to be effective. The Stoic solution isn't bitterness, withdrawal, or hostility. It's internal strength. When you stop outsourcing your emotional stability, manipulation loses its power. Here's how Stoic men break the cycle, and none of it requires becoming cold, detached, or emotionally unavailable. It starts with responsibility, not for other people's feelings, but for your own internal state. First, detach your self-worth from attention. Attention feels good, but it's not a measure of value. When attention becomes the proof that you matter, you start chasing it, protecting it, and fearing its loss. Stoic men understand that attention is optional. It can be enjoyed, but it isn't needed to feel whole. Self-respect comes from living in alignment with your values, not from being chosen, texted back, or prioritized on someone else's schedule. Second, pause before reacting. Most emotional mistakes happen in the first few seconds after a trigger. A delayed reply, a change in tone, a sudden pullback. Weak men react immediately, trying to regain certainty. Stoic men pause. Silence is not rejection. Silence is information. It tells you how the other person behaves under no pressure. When you don't rush to fill the gap, you regain control over your actions and your dignity. Third, master your inner dialogue. The real battle isn't external, it's internal. The moment your thoughts turn into "what if I lose her?" or "what did I do wrong?" you've already handed over power. Fear-based thinking creates urgency, and urgency leads to poor decisions. Stoic men challenge their assumptions. They don't accept every anxious thought as truth. They observe it, question it, and choose a response instead of surrendering to impulse. Fourth, lead emotionally instead of defensively. Defensive behavior is driven by fear of loss. Emotional leadership is driven by stability. Calm men don't try to control outcomes. They control themselves. They communicate clearly, set boundaries without anger, and walk away without drama when something no longer aligns. This emotional steadiness creates respect because it signals strength, not need. When you apply these principles consistently, the transformation is noticeable. The constant anxiety fades. You stop overthinking every interaction. Your boundaries become clear without being aggressive. And respect replaces desperation because you no longer negotiate your worth. This isn't about winning games or manipulating back. It's about becoming unshakable. When you are emotionally grounded, manipulation has nothing to attach to. Relationships become choices, not emotional lifelines. If you want emotional mastery, calm confidence, and stoic clarity in dating, subscribe to Daily Stoic Mindset. This channel is for men who want control over themselves before they seek control over their outcomes. Like this video if it challenged your perspective. Comment the number that hit closest to home. Remember this: attraction begins where emotional control is mastered.